Welcome to the final episode of Moral Drift. I'm your host once again, Maria. Throughout this series, we've explored what anchors ethical leadership and how easily leaders can lose their way. We've seen how power, influence, and subtle rationalizations can quietly erode the moral compass. But today, we turn toward the future. We're living in a world defined by constant transformation. Artificial intelligence shaping decision making, work, and even human relationships, raising urgent ethical questions about bias, accountability, and control. Globalization connects us more than ever, but also intensifies the pressure to act fast, scale big, and compete relentlessly. Meanwhile, social justice movements, such as the Me Too movement that gained global momentum in 2017, demand that leaders confront long ignored inequities, but not just in policy, in practice and culture. Add to that a 24/7 digital landscape, rising mistrust in institutions, and the looming threats of climate change and intense political polarization. The ethical challenges facing today's leaders become so complex, more visible, and more consequential than ever. So, what does it mean to lead ethically now when the ground keeps shifting beneath us? How do leaders stay rooted in values while navigating pressure, innovation, and rapid change? Ethics start at the top, but can't stop there. To build ethical cultures, ethics have to flow through every level of an organization, kind of like a current, shaping not just policies, but also the daily behaviors, decisions, and conversations that define its culture. Leadership sets the tone, yes, but ethical integrity is only sustainable when it's built into the systems, habits, and norms that guide how people actually work together. Having studied organizational leadership at Wright State University, this concept was highly stressed in my leading organizations course. And I learned this is where many organizations fall short. They issue codes of conduct or post value statements on the wall, in the break room, but fail to build environments where those values are actually lived. Research by Bartone, 2010, emphasizes that leadership alone isn't enough. Team dynamics play a crucial role. If a culture doesn't support open dialogue, shared responsibility, and peer accountability, even the most well-intentioned ethical commitments will collapse under pressure. One of the most powerful tools a leader can use is psychological safety. This means creating a climate where people feel safe to raise questions, admit their mistakes, or challenge someone's decisions without the fear of retaliation or shame. When team members are silenced by hierarchy or politics, unethical behavior festers in the shadows. But when they're empowered to speak up, organizations become more resilient, adaptable, and ethically grounded. So, what does this look like in practice? It's not about grand gestures. It's about encouraging transparency and everyday decisions. It's about rewarding honesty, even when the news is hard to hear, not just rewarding outcomes. It's also about modeling humility and consistency as a leader so that integrity becomes, again, the norm, not the exception. Ethical leadership is not a checklist. It's a culture you cultivate one decision at a time. Let's take Microsoft as a real world example. When Satya Nadella became CEO in 2014, he inherited a company that was very profitable, but deeply fractured with a toxic competitive culture that stifled collaboration and innovation. You see, Nadella knew that to move the company forward, he had to change more than the strategy. He had to change and cultivate the culture. He emphasized empathy, humility, and ethical leadership, not just at the executive level, but across the entire organization, to general personnel and the workforce as a whole. He encouraged teams to shift from a fixed to a growth mindset and restructured performance reviews to value how people achieved their results, not just what they achieved. That meant rewarding teamwork, curiosity, and integrity, and discouraging the old cutthroat mentality like that at Enron. Microsoft also built systems of accountability and psychological safety in its day-to-day work. Employees were encouraged to speak up, challenge ideas, and flag ethical concerns, including in emerging areas like AI and data privacy. This wasn't just for show. Internal feedback directly influenced company policy and product decisions. In other words, ethics weren't just a value, they became habit, woven into how Microsoft operated at every level. A great article that I found on Microsoft specifically was Leading a Company That Can Thrive in a Chaotic World. It's from Harvard Business Review, digital articles 1-7. So if you're curious after this episode ends, you can take a look at that. But let's shift focus to the continued ethical challenges of the future. Today's leaders face dilemmas we've never seen before. Should AI be allowed to make hiring decisions? How should companies handle climate responsibility when profit is at stake? I know the thought of AI making hiring decisions scares me. I'm reemerging into the workforce after being a mother and a student for an extended period of time, and I'm sure AI would frown upon the gaps in my work history. But according to Bartico, true moral leadership means defining not only what's right, but what's practical and responsible in a rapidly changing world. The people who will be most affected by today's ethical decisions and who will soon be making them are the next generation. So I wanted to bring in someone from Gen Z who's already thinking about these issues. Joining me is my daughter, who's in high school. And like many in her generation, she's already grappling with big decisions about fairness, justice, and the future. Thanks for being here tonight. Even though I know you'd probably rather be in bed, I do appreciate you lending another perspective. But let me ask you, when you think about leaders in the future, especially ones using technology like AI or facing global issues like climate change, what do you think the leaders need to do to stay ethical?
Honestly, when I think about the future, it's all super overwhelming. There's so much changing so fast, like you said. Um, AI making decisions or the climate getting worse. I don't always know what the answers are, but I do know I want to be able to trust the people that are in charge. I think real leaders, the kind I would look up to, need to be honest, even when it's hard. They need to think about more than just money or their social media popularity, and they should care about people in the future. Empathy is definitely a big deal. In religion class, my teacher talks about how seeing others with compassion should guide the choices we make. And Another example, in history class, we've learned that the leaders on the wrong side of things are usually the ones who don't take responsibility for their actions. When a ton of decisions are being made by technology, I think it's important that the humans leading that technology have values. I guess I don't expect leaders to be perfect, but I do expect them to be responsible and willing to listen to us. That's what would help me feel safe and hopeful, even with all the problems that we're facing right now.
Oh, thanks for your input. I really appreciate it. I like having that other perspective. It's really great to hear from you. So, like my daughter, the next generation is watching and waiting to lead. But how do we prepare them and ourselves to grow into the ethical leaders she discussed? The truth is, leaders aren't born, they're shaped by an amalgamation of what they see, who they learn from, and how they're encouraged to think. I do want to give a brief shout out to my professor. My professor, Christy Maxwell, who helped me through exploring this concept of leadership in creating this project. She seemed to appreciate my use of the word amalgamation. So I just wanted to throw that in there. But to get back on topic, in today's world, where ethical challenges move as fast as technology and global change, we need more than just good intentions. We need a clear framework for nurturing integrity. I'd like to give a great example of this. Bill George is the former CEO of Medtronic. It's one of the largest, most respected medical technology companies in the world. Medtronic is known for its groundbreaking work in treating chronic diseases with devices like pacemakers, insulin pumps, and surgical tools. Under Bill George's leadership, the company didn't just focus on profit. It made ethical leadership a cornerstone of its success. Mr. George has also made a huge impact through his teachings and writings. After stepping down from Medtronic, he became a professor at Harvard Business School, where he helped define the concept of authentic leadership. In his book, it's called True North, Emerging Leader Edition. I believe you can find it on Amazon, like most things. George explains that true leaders are grounded in values, not their ego. They lead with purpose and integrity, facing dilemmas with self-awareness, humility, and accountability. So when we talk about shaping ethical leaders, we look at people like Bill George, who proves that leadership isn't about simply following a rule book. It's about developing a whole mindset rooted in humility, courage, responsibility, all the leadership things. Rather than giving young leaders a checklist of to-dos and don'ts, we must show them that ethical leadership is an ongoing process of reflection, feedback, learning, more learning, and that they'll grow into their values through real-world experiences and mentorship. Maybe most importantly, we need to show them by example what ethical leadership looks like when the stakes are high. But as we start to wrap up this final episode, I want to leave you with a thought. Something for my listeners and my lovely guest to ponder, both as leaders and as people. Imagine you're a CEO. You're offered a deal that boosts profits, but it harms a vulnerable community. What do you do? What kind of legacy do you want to leave? But these aren't just hypothetical questions either. They represent the real choices leaders face every single day. And as we've explored, those decisions are shaped by far more than just what's right or wrong on paper. They're influenced by the psychology of power, personality traits, and the social dynamics that affect all of us. If we look at Kohlberg's stages of moral development, we see that leaders' decisions are often guided by where they stand on that spectrum. At the lower stages, individuals are driven by self-interest or the desire to avoid punishment, as we saw in the rise and fall of Enron, where leaders prioritized personal gain at the expense of honesty and responsibility. At higher stages of Kohlberg's moral development, leaders consider broader ethical principles, like Malala Yousafzai, who made sacrifices for the greater good, embodying moral reasoning aligned with justice and human rights. In today's world, the consequences of ignoring ethical principles are severe. I mean, just look at the downfall of Elizabeth Holmes that we discussed previously from Theranos, where the pursuit of success at all costs led to manipulation and betrayal of trust. Or if we go back a few decades, Richard Nixon, whose disregard for ethics and legal boundaries ultimately led to his resignation. These little examples, or maybe big ones, on the scale of impactful leaders, unethical leaders, remind us of the dangerous consequences when leaders drift too far from their moral compass. Over the course of Moral Drift, we've examined the importance of understanding ethics, integrity, what guides leaders in navigating the murky waters of power and influence. In episode 2, we explored the forces of power, influence, and the psychology behind the moral drift, whether it's the personality traits to rationalizations leaders make when they start to become unethical. And today, in episode 3, we talked about how we can lead ethically in a world of rapid change, technology, and huge global challenges. The key takeaway: ethical leadership is never automatic. It requires constant self-reflection, accountability, and a commitment to doing what's right, even when the world keeps pushing us to do otherwise. The stakes are high, but by shaping our own values and leading with integrity, we can't avoid the drift. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the moral challenges of leadership. As we close this chapter, stay mindful of the responsibility you hold and the leadership legacy you wish to create. I'm your host, Maria, and have a great night.